The Wringer, Day 3. As Palmer later heard the story, Arthur Dodds made a real nuisance of himself that day. He kept darting out of the field to chase wounded pigeons, only to be chased away himself by the real ringers. Arthur Dodds, like Palmer, was only 5 years old at the time. Finally, he got what he wanted. A shot bird, instead of falling onto the soccer field, made it to the picnic area before it came down. Arthur saw and lit out after it. He heard a woman screaming. The bird had fallen right into the pink-fringed stroller where her baby was sleeping. By the time Arthur got there, the pigeon was on the ground and being chased around the picnic tables by half a dozen squealing toddlers. Arthur joined the chase. The bird flapped up onto a table. People screamed. Hot dogs flew. Arthur lunged across the table, knocking drinks, smashing pickled eggs, and snatched the pigeon by the legs in a bowl of chicken salad. According to the story, Arthur threw his arms into the air like a boxing champion and crowed, "Got me one!" Then right before the gaping eyes of the picnickers, he wrung its neck. Arthur Dodds wasn't finished. So proud was he of his dead pigeon that he took it home, wrapped it in a newspaper, and hid it under his bed. For almost a week, he charged kids a quarter apiece for a look. Then his mother started to smell something, and pretty soon that was that. Palmer smelled something too, something about his father when he would return from pigeon days. As often happened, Palmer would wind up in his father's lap. It was his favorite place in all the world, where he was safe from everything. But on those days, he could smell the gray and sour odor of the gun smoke. The closer he nuzzled into father's shirt, the more he could smell it. Then he began smelling the gray and sour odor, even when his father wasn't there, even when pigeon day was over. It might happen in the morning as he sat in school, or at night as he lay in bed. It could even happen in his father's lap in the middle of winter, when the shotgun had been locked away for months. The smell was sure to come on his birthday. It did not spoil his birthday, as it did not spoil his father's lap. But it changed those things, so they did not feel quite as good as before. Other things changed. Arthur Dodds became Beans, and Beans was joined by Billy Natoa, who became Mutto, and by a new, very tall boy in town known as Henry. Palmer wanted to join them, but they said he was too small and too young, and that he had a funny first name, and that he played with girls, little ones at that. Which wasn't true. The older he got, the less he had to do with Dorothy Gruzik. When he went off to first grade, he left her on her front steps clutching a doll. In second grade, he said to the guys, "She's my neighbor. That's all. I can't help that, can I? And anyway, what do I want with a first grader?" But they weren't listening. Palmer invited them to his 8th birthday, but no one came. So his mother stormed across the street and dragged Dorothy to the dining room table, and his mother and father and Dorothy sang happy birthday to him. And his mother had a big smile, but her eyes were red. That was the summer that Palmer's family went on a vacation trip. They stopped in the big city for a day. From the Tourist Information Center, they got a map and gave themselves a walking tour of historic places. Pigeons were everywhere, sidewalks, ledges, steps. Palmer even saw one crossing a street with a crowd of people on a green light, just another pedestrian. They strutted boldly, those pigeons going about their business, pecking here, pecking there. They did not seem in the least bit afraid of or apologetic. They acted as if they belonged, as if this was their city as well as the people's. And the people, they did not even seem to notice the pigeons. Palmer kept tugging at his parents. "Look, there's one. Look at that one." But the city people ignored them. No one had a shotgun. Except for the wounded pigeon that was rung in front of him when he was 4, this was Palmer's first close look at the birds. He had heard that pigeons were dirty, filthy, nothing more than rats with wings. He looked and looked, but all he saw were plump, pretty birds with shiny coats. He was especially fascinated by how they moved. They did not hop, like sparrows or robins, but they walked, one pink foot in front of the other, just like people. With each step, the head gave a nod, as if to say, "Yes, I will. I agree. You're right." As Palmer saw it, the pigeon was a most agreeable bird. They were passing through a park with many trees and benches when Palmer saw something that stopped him in his tracks. A man sitting on a bench was smothered in pigeons. They were on his shoulders, his head, his lap, snapping up seeds that the man appeared to have poured over himself. The pigeons were cooing and the man was giggling. Or was the man cooing and the pigeons giggling? It was hard to tell. Back home, it occurred to Palmer that since he now could read quite well, he should have another look at the inscription on the golden pigeon statue in the den. It said, "Sharpshooter Award, Pigeon Day, 1989. There, standing before the golden pigeon, the odor of gunsmoke came to him, and he understood that his father was a shooter. It was about then that Palmer began to feel a certain tilt to his life. Time became a sliding board, at the bottom of which awaited his 10th birthday. Beans kept asking, "You gonna be a ringer?" Every time Palmer would look straight into that crayon box of teeth and say, "Sure thing." And every time he said it, he could feel his heart thump. For among all the changes in his life, one thing stayed the same. It was something he had known since his second pigeon day, when he sat with Dorothy Gruzik on the swings. He did not want to be a ringer. Chapter 11. Cotton candy days, Ferris wheel nights. Family Fest was almost better than Christmas, and longer. What had been the American Legion baseball field last week was this week a wonderland. 10 times over, Palmer explored every ride, every food stand, every amusement booth. He loved the boiling fats, crackling hiss that cooked his fries and funnel cakes. He loved the yelp and splash when a ball hit the mark at the Dunk-A-Kid booth, the pop of darted balloons, the St. Bernard-sized grand prizes, tilt-a-whirls, woozy flight, neon lights like bottled fireworks, House of Horrors and Pretzel Man, and chocolate bananas on a stick. But in this year of Palmer's life, not even Family Fest was pure and easy fun. Despite the gleeful shouting and merry-go-round music, he could not forget the soccer field at far end of the park, silent, waiting. At times, the Ferris wheel seemed to be winching minutes, hauling him ever closer to Saturday and the boom and smell of gun smoke. He tried to avoid the guys, but it wasn't as easy as before. After the treatment, they had been showing him a newfound respect, and often they came looking for him. He began leaving his house by the back door. He kept his eyes peeled at the fest. Dorothy showed him no respect at all. He could have had 100 treatments, and it would not have impressed her. And yet Palmer forgave her. He reminded himself that she was young and a girl and did not understand life beyond her hopscotch squares. Also, there was the memory of his second pigeon day, shared with Dorothy. As the week raced toward Saturday, he began to feel closer to her. But when he saw Dorothy's face flashing in the neon lights and called her name, she only stuck up her nose and turned away. He rode the rides. His parents gave him money each day to spend. When that ran out, he used his own savings. He wobbled and swirled and tilted and whirled and plunged and soared. The closer he came to Saturday, the more he rode. The gang, whenever he bumped into them, kept saying, "See you Saturday, snots." 6 o'clock. They were supposed to meet at the World War I cannon. The shooting would begin at 7 and continue all day. When he was younger, this was a matter of wonderment to Palmer. It became the means by which he could grasp the first really big number in his life, 5,000. For a long time, 5,000 meant the number of pigeons you could shoot in one day, one by one. As he grew a little older, he discovered machine guns and tanks and bazookas and, of course, bombs. "Why don't you just blow them up and put them out of their misery all at once?" he asked his father one day. That was when his father explained how it all worked. He explained that there was more to it than putting the pigeons out of their misery. He said that only people who paid money were allowed to shoot the pigeons, and that the money was used to make the park better. "So you see," he said, "you can thank the pigeon for the swings at the playground." And for a time thereafter, Palmer did just that. Whenever he swung on a swing, he thanked the pigeon. Palmer knew that Beans and the guys intended to stay all day, from the first boom until the last gray feather floated to earth. He went to bed Friday night. When he went to bed Friday night, he had decided that what he would do. He would not show up at the cannon. If they came checking, he would be in bed pretending to be sick. He would tell them that he had really wanted to go, but his mother wouldn't let him. He felt good. The problem was solved. He went to sleep with a smile. Chapter 12. In his dream, the pigeons came to town, not 5,000, but millions. In their beaks, they pinched the edges of the town, plucked it up, and flew away with it, as if it were a Christmas tree display on a tablecloth. The only sound was the flutter of wings. Palmer wondered where they were going. They seemed to be leaving the earth behind. Ahead, all around, was nothing but space and the blackest of nights. On and on they flew. Then he felt a spot of warmth on his face. A puff of light broke the blackness. He began to worry. Were they heading for the sun? Were they going to dump him and the whole town into that fiery ball? The light grew a bit brighter. A pigeon was pecking him on the rump, pecking him and giggling. He squirmed to get away. He tried to scream, but instead of his own voice, he heard another's saying, "Pinch him harder. Did you get bare skin?" He opened his eyes. The light was blinding, and then went away. It was totally dark. The nightlight was off, and he was not alone in bed. Somebody was in bed with him. He started to make a sound, but his mouth was clamped by a hand. Somebody laughed out loud. Somebody growled. Shut up, they'll hear. He smelled baked beans. The light reappeared. It was a little pen light. It shone on two faces. One of them said, "Shut up now, Snots, okay? It's just us, Beans and Muddle, okay?" Palmer nodded, and the hand left his mouth. He sat up. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" A glance at his window answered the question. The screen was up. His window was above the roof of the back porch. It could be done. Next thing he knew, he was yanked out of bed and onto his feet. "Come on," whispered Beans. "We got somewhere to go." It did not occur to Palmer not to go along. Once the shock wore off, he realized what an honor had been granted him. Imagine, a month ago these guys ignored him except to tease him. Now they snuck into his house and climbed into bed with him. Palmer LaRue. Amazing. He turned on his nightlight and dressed, and out of the window they went. From the roof edge they slid down a plank that Beans and Muddle had borrowed from a building site. "Let's go," barked Beans. "Where?" said Palmer, but Beans was taking off. They were a whisper through the nighttime town. By Beans' orders, they kept to the alleyways. They trotted in file, first Beans, then Muddle, then Palmer. The only sound was their sneakers patting the ground. Never before, not even on New Year's Eve, had Palmer been up so late. Not to mention outside without a parent. It was not like Palmer to do this. He had always been an obedient kid. Lay down a rule and Palmer followed it. He cringed at what his parents would say if they found out. But the thrill of it, the honor of it, swept all other feelings away. Jogging through the dark and sleeping alleyways, skirting pools of streetlight, he imagined he was a toy-led soldier come to life, following Sergeant Beans and Private Muddle on a mission behind enemy lines. He loved these guys. He would follow them anywhere. He wondered what other adventures awaited him in the days and years ahead. They trotted through the park and past the National Guard Armory. They turned a corner and they were at the old boarded-up railroad station. Palmer smelled something like animals and heard small, soft sounds. In the moonlight he saw a second building as tall as the station and nearly as long. He did not remember the second building. He began to hear that the sounds were voices, and he saw that the second building was not a building at all. It was a mountain of crates and soft, sleeping cooings. It was 5,000 pigeons. He stopped. Beans and Muddle trotted on. They cheered and yipped and did a nutty dance before the stacked crates. Their moon-cast shadows snagged on potholes in the old parking lot and pulled like black taffy. They made their arms like rifles and barked, "Bang, bang!" and a squabbling uproar filled the night. "Come on, Snots," they called. They picked up sticks and racketed along the slats. They played the crates like drums. "Snots!" Palmer could not move. 10,000 orange eyes burned holes in his heart. He heard a wrenching screech. They were ripping open a crate. What were they up to? "Grab him, grab him!" Beans was shrieking. 10,000 orange eyes. "Got him!" Palmer called. "I gotta go back. I have to go to the bathroom." He ran. He did not use the alleys. He ran down the middle of the streets, the middle of the lights, chased every step by the uproar of the crates. 10,000 orange eyes trailing him into his house, into his bed, under his sheet, into his sleep. In the morning, Saturday morning, awakening, he heard tiny popping sounds in the distance. He closed his window, pulled down the shade. He brought his TV closer and turned it on loud. Blessedly, they did not come for him. Still, to be safe, on the safe side, he told his mother he was ill and stayed in bed all day. She looked at him a little funny at first, then was especially nice the rest of the day, as if he really were sick. She did not try to make him open the window, because it was July. She turned on the fan. He watched TV. He read. He cut out Beetle Bailey comics for his collection. His mother played cards and Monopoly with him. He did not play with his soldiers. Several times, when the light was deeply golden on the window shade, he heard the doorbell downstairs and his mother going to answer. She did not say who was there. He did not ask. When his mother came in to kiss him good night, she turned off the TV and opened the window. The night was silent. Nipper, Chapter 13. It's a doozy. These were his mother's words as she sat with him, looking out the living room window. His father called it a blizzard. Palmer called it rotten luck. It could have snowed on Christmas, the day he got his new sled, but it didn't. Nor did it snow the next day, or the next, or any day for the rest of the year. Vacation days, no homework days, days that could have been filled with whistling plunges down Valentine's Hill were filled instead with hateful frowning at a cloudless sky. The new sled was a classic, polished wood, red runners, steering handles. It no more belonged on the living room rug than a Maserati belonged in a stable. On New Year's Day, Palmer's father said to him, "You know, I swear the weather plays games with people. Every time I decide not to take an umbrella, that's when it rains. Maybe snow is the same way. Maybe we can fool it. Why don't you try putting the sled away, like it's spring and sledding's over for the year?" Having no better idea, Palmer dragged his sled down to the basement. He added touches of his own. He took off his shirt, wiped his brow, and said, "Whew, sure is hot out these days. I can't wait to go swimming." He put the sled in the farthest, darkest corner. "Won't be needing this thing, that's for sure." He covered it with an old blanket. He stacked cardboard boxes on top of it. He saluted, "Adios, old pal," and walked away. This was mid-afternoon. At dinner time, he looked outside. He could not see stars. By 7 o'clock, the first thin flakes were falling. He stood at the front door and cheered, "Snow!" and brought the sled back upstairs. The next day was the last day of the holiday vacation. He expected it to be still and white and waiting for sleds. Instead, he awoke to a blizzard thrashing his window pane. He looked out. The world seemed to have come to an icy boil. He could not see to the end of the backyard. He ran downstairs. A car, molded in snow, was stranded sideways in the street. The howling wind flung itself at the house with a fury that frightened him. Even his mother shuddered beside him as she repeated, "A real doozy." "I might as well chop up my sled," Palmer grumped. She draped an arm around him. "Well, look on the bright side. If it's too bad to go sledding today, it'll probably be too bad for the buses tomorrow morning. Bet you'll have a snow day." She was right. January 3rd was a day for snowplows and snow boots, snowballs and sleds. It seemed like every kid in town turned up on Valentine's Hill. All day long, Palmer, Beans, Mutto, and Henry made a quadruple-decker sandwich as the new sled sailed and resailed down the slope. That day, as a crimson sun fell below the rooftops, one weary and happy kid dragged his sled back to port. Before going downstairs to dinner, Palmer took a moment to look out his bedroom window. He had never cared much for scenery. Yet the scene outside touched something within him. The setting sun seemed to have ladled its syrupy light over the crusted snow, so that ordinary house parts and backyards, in this fading moment, seemed a spectacular raspberry dessert. When his eyes fell to the porch rooftop just outside his window, he saw the four-toed imprints of bird feet etched into the snow. A good thing there was no homework over Christmas vacation, for Palmer could never have managed. He was sound asleep by 8 o'clock and stayed that way until he heard the tapping. This was unusual. His mother never bothered to knock in the morning, but came right in. "Who's there?" he said, his eyes still closed, his voice barely working. There was no answer. His eyes opened. It was daylight. "Come in." The door did not move. Had he been dreaming? There again, the tapping. It was not coming from the door. It was coming from the window. The guys! Palmer was suddenly sharply awake. Why would the guys come now, in the morning before school? He got out of bed, raised the window shade, and froze. It wasn't Beans. It wasn't Mutto. It was a bird. More to the point, it was a pigeon.